Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening or perhaps watching to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. We have a repeat guest today, which I'm very, very excited about. One, Bobby Marhamat. I worked very hard on the name. I think I nailed it, but I'll let Bobby correct me if I did not. A couple things I want you to know about Bobby. He's a business builder, a scaling expert, a mentor. But what I really want to talk about today is his role as CEO of Raydiant Technology. I'm going to let him explain to you guys what Raydiant is. But suffice it to say, they touch a lot of retailers, a lot of restaurateurs. They are in the nitty-gritty operations portion of a lot of these people's businesses. Bobby, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you being here. If you wouldn't mind, tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do, what Raydiant does. And then what I'm really excited about is digging into the reopening of retail insight report that you guys did, where you went out and surveyed over 400 brick-and-mortar operators. I'm very excited to be able to dig into that report with you. Bobby, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me again. So we at Raydiant are helping restaurateurs, retailers, brick-and-mortar operators build great experiences in their locations, to bring customers back, to increase loyalty, to make more money in store. So we start with digital signage and tie in all the other pieces into a store to be able to create that environment. As we talked about kind of last time, customers really come into locations and come back to brands and shop back with brands because of experiences. And we help create that in a very, very simple way. Our platform lets you connect all the way from, promos to music to different nowadays, different, safety bulletins to, being able to show interactive clothing items, or it just depends what business you are in. But we help kind of bring all that together in a store location and create a great experience for our merchants.
So obviously this technology hasn't been around forever. I remember when there were a lot more kind of chalkboards and sandwich boards, and just all runs the gamut of signage. When did this kind of digital signage platform and even more than that, like kind of digital ecosystem really start to take off?
Yeah, I'd say, even today, it's still in the infancy, cycle of things, in the sense that some people are adopting it, but it's much more than just signage on a screen. Signage on a screen has been, around for, I'd say, the last 10, 15 years. You could in some fashion do that. But it's much more than that. It's much more than it's actually putting together, initially starting with who's my customer, how am I going to put together really this experience in store that runs itself, where I'm able to interact with my customer, or I'm able to create that loyalty, where I'm able to kind of put all the things together that I need to be able to get my customer to feel like they're a part of this brand. And so that's only been, I'd say, again, early infancy kind of stage, but I'd say, in the last year and a half is really where things have been, taking off, where people have been understanding this. And now through the pandemic, retailers, restaurateurs really get it. They know, they're preparing for it. And I know we'll probably talk about that here in a few, but, that's the part that I think the industry is really going to take off, and people are going to pay much more attention to how do I create these great experiences in my locations.
So do you think that it has taken off, let's call it in the last 18 months to 5 years? I started probably seeing the digital boards 5 years ago, mm-hmm. but they weren't good yet, right? Like it was like you could tell, like there were like white blurry lines around it. It's like cut and paste on a PDF. I mean, it was there was obviously some software, hardware advances that weren't quite there yet. Do you think that the implementation, the adoption rate has gone up so much because restaurateurs, retailers are finally starting to understand that experiential is everything, and if you're not creating a customer an experience that they can't get at home, then you might as well kind of pick another line of work? Or why do you think this is? Or is it a hardware issue? The hardware is finally caught up. The software is finally caught up to what the customer needs. Like, what is it that has caused this to explode in the last couple of years?
It's what's interesting is yeah, it's exactly the operators understanding and realizing that in order to compete and in order to create great brands and in order to create repeat customers, they need to be able to build experiences, experiential retail, and restaurants and all that good stuff are the future of how I'm going to build up my business. And even through the pandemic, it's actually interesting because even though people can't freely come into store locations and shop and interact like they used to, the companies that are actually adopting, both in creating experiences and adopting technologies right now, are the ones that are starting to create a lot more mind share with their customers, and I think are going to be poised for growth as we get out of this pandemic as well.
So again, I really want to jump into this report, but something that's been at the top of my mind lately. I'm lucky enough to talk to some really smart people on this podcast all the time. Certainly a lot smarter than I am. Certainly a lot more in touch with the bleeding edge of consumer behavior. What do you think about the notion that we have seen a 3 to 5 year acceleration in the retail business that has been compressed into the last 6 months? And what innovation change in the market have you seen that would be kind of, really encapsulate that notion? Unless you disagree with it, unless you say I don't buy that.
No, I definitely buy that. I think I think the things that have been accelerated are the use of technology to be able to make my customers feel safer, the use of technology to be able to make my employees feel safer, the use of technology to be able to interact with my customers. And even though I'm not going to be able to, interact the same way that I used to be interacting with them, how do I make them feel, comfortable? How do I make them feel connected to my brand? I think all of that has been accelerated, all the way from, things like, curbside technology that some companies have tied in to delivery mechanisms that some have. It's actually interesting. There's some e-commerce only companies that have actually realized they do need a storefront to be able to do curbside, to be able to have a local store where people can go pick up. And so there's been actually advances in the other direction as well. So I think
I don't want to interrupt you, but can you unpack that a little bit for me? Because that, to me, like my little real estate brain started firing, and it's been hibernating here for a few months.
Yeah.
Explain to me, because that seems really counterintuitive that these DTC, direct-to-consumer brands, click-to-shop kind of brands in the middle of a pandemic where people can't go and visit retail are thinking about doing brick and mortar. Like, give me some examples of that, or give me unpack that a little bit for me. Let me know why people are coming to that realization, even though it might feel counterintuitive right now.
Absolutely. I'll give you a couple examples of real brands. There's a brand called Pure that does skincare, and they've been kind of an e-commerce only shop. But as they've been realizing, during this pandemic, and I think what's going to be kind of the future here is customers during the pandemic want to be able to come and pick up, want to be able to come, even if they're not able to go in store and shop, they want to be able to come and walk through the store and be able to see, and from signage, learn about the different products that are in the store. They want to be able to pick up items like we just talked about. That brand in particular is thinking about putting up, stores in, all the real, major hubs in the United States to be able to interact with their customers in that way. There's, of course, the famous Warby Parker that has said, hey, we're going to go put small footprints in different locations, both for pickup again, and also for education. A lot of what I think we're going to see in retail is, a lot of the larger locations are probably going to, become a little bit smaller as far as footprints go. But there's going to be a lot of, this is what I kind of envision as the future of malls. And as we're talking to different retailers and restaurateurs, there's going to be a lot of e-commerce only companies that come into play and have these small showrooms where people can come at least learn, can come interact with a salesperson, can come pick up curbside. So I think there's going to be a lot of that happening in the next few years.
Do you think that those will be, and again, we're speculating right now, right? Or at least I am.
Of course. Yeah.
But do you think that because I agree with you, I like what you're saying, and I think that makes sense. Do you think that these groups will kind of join together and go under one 5,000 square foot footprint where 10 or 20 brands can all come together like a Beta, Neighborhood Goods, Naked, something like that? Or do you think that these mall operators will stay ahead of it and say, no, like we want you guys each in your little 400 square foot pod and we're just going to shrink your footprint? Or is it just a combination of those that we haven't seen yet?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a combination of both. I think you're going to see the Macy's of the world and those larger department stores create in-store environments that are, stores within a store, if you will, and environments where you can go learn about different brands and interact. I think that's one thing that's going to happen with the larger stores. And then I think we're going to walk through malls and we're going to see a lot more retailers because the footprints are going to be smaller and there's going to be a lot more of them, which I think is great for consumers. It's also great for brands to be able to interact in that way. I think there's been a huge push on the e-commerce side, which I think is a great business for a lot of companies. But I think a lot of companies are also realizing during this pandemic that they have to go the other way around. And as they're doing that, I just interviewed with a larger mall operator a couple of days ago, and they're seeing the same thing. They're seeing a lot of brands come to them and say, hey, I just need 400 square feet to be able to, put up my brand on e-commerce only place. I think we're going to see a large portion of malls change entirely, with department stores kind of changing, but really the biggest change coming from smaller footprint stores in malls.
I think that makes a ton of sense, and we've already seen it. Macerich has a concept that they've already tried like that. I think that is the future, and if you think about it from a consumer level, and you don't go into Hudson Yards, right? Because Hudson Yards has this massive tourism crush built into it, right? Or these places that you're getting somebody to go in there and then they might not come back for 6 months or a year. Right. That makes sense for a traditional retailer because you're not seeing it all the time. But if you're going into more of a neighborhood environment, the idea of having a lot of kind of a turnstile of smaller brands coming and going, it really puts that sense of discovery back into the retail process, right? Because how fun is it when you go into a retail environment and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't know that was there. And it could be something as simple as like a little Tesla pop-up or a Maserati 100%. Pop-up, something like that. But like, oh, cool, that wasn't here when I was here the other day. Exactly. Gives you kind of a reason to go back. So to your point about it being good for the consumer, I can absolutely understand that.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that comes to this, Adam, is that although, again, there's a lot of, right now in the middle of the pandemic, we've moved to a lot of technologies where you can limit the interaction, with either stores or store associates or whatever the case is. I think people are waiting for this, right? They're in their homes like, what's next? I can't wait to go shop in a safe way, of course, but I think this is going to be one of those things where retail, essentially, and of course the restaurant world, because you have to eat as you're kind of shopping and out there, is going to take off like crazy. Again, we're going to see a different world, but I think it's going to be very exciting.
All right, as segues go, Bobby, that was pretty good. Let's dial in the reopening of retail, insights from 400 plus brick and mortar operators. I'll let you kick it off. I've got some specific questions, but I'd like you to start it off and maybe tell me something that you didn't expect, something that was kind of novel that maybe you learned from talking to all these retailers, or just give us a couple sound bites, some high level stuff that you learned as you were talking to these guys in what is arguably the most traumatic time any retailer's ever seen.
I guess the part that I was most surprised about, I thought it would take a lot more convincing on our part to get, retailers and, again, restaurateurs to be able to invest into the future of, what's going to become a restaurant and retail interactions. I think that was, I think a lot of the brands that we've been talking to, they fall into two different buckets. They're either in a place where it's status quo and they don't think they need to make any changes, and they're, just kind of waiting for things to open up and they think that life is normal, where I think that, is probably not the right view these days. That
still exists.
Right.
Okay.
And then I think there's the other segment where I was actually surprised it was this large, but about 85% of the retailers that we interviewed, said they are going to invest in in-store experiences. They are going to invest in, even it was interesting. 26% of them said they're going to invest in additional real estate, of course, smaller footprints, because they think there's an opportunity coming out of this pandemic. Because they think the other percentage, the 15% probably, that say we're not going to do anything, are probably going to be the ones that either downsize or decide to go into a different business. But they're going to take advantage of these markets and be able to go and open up during this time, which I think is great to see. The brands that actually focus on, again, experiences and great and have created these great brands that are not just focused on price and just kind of competing with price with different retailers, I think are the ones that are going to see huge advantages come out of the next few years.
So how can people jump on these opportunities? So we're seeing the calls that I'm getting, because brick and mortar real estate guy, right? Like I'm not, I don't hide that. That's my business. That's what I do. How can these retailers be ready to jump on an opportunity when nobody quite knows what the opportunity is? Nobody quite knows what the future holds. How can a retailer, if a retailer's coming to you and saying, Bobby, you're talking to all these people, you got this cool business, you got your finger on the pulse, how can I be ready? How can I take advantage? Because let's be honest, the first 20 of these guys that go to a Simon Property Group or somebody like that and say, hey, good news, I sell widgets, I only want 400 square feet, I really only want to pay you percentage rent, I really only want to do a 4-month deal, they're going to get a door just slammed in their face, right? So how would you coach these people to be ready to take advantage of these opportunities? And how do you think the landlords are going to react?
I think the good that comes out of the pandemic is a lot of the brands that are paying attention to their customers and where their customers are buying. Like I'll give you one example. There's actually a great retail store here in San Francisco that I love, and as they've been a local shop, but as they've been kind of transforming into a little bit more of the e-commerce side and selling online and all that good stuff. A great part of what they've gotten out of this is they have data now that tells them where their shop is coming from. Right now, they in particular were telling me, over 30% of their customers are coming from New York. So I'm a San Francisco shop. I'm going to start to think about real estate in the New York environment because this is great. If I can go interact with more customers there, then that's great. I can be able to kind of expand my shop and expand my footprint and all that good stuff. So I think a lot of the customers that are, our customers that are paying attention to using the data that they're getting from going, and having a portion of their sales come from online sales and e-commerce sales, are using that data to be able to plan for what's next in the physical world, if you will.
That's really interesting because what you're saying, I mean, that is like data 101 for a direct-to-consumer brand, right? Like knowing where their customers are coming from, understanding, what geo targets, where should they open a store because they know where the people are coming from, yada, yada, yada.
Exactly.
This is like business 101 for direct to consumers. Very interesting that you say that you're starting to see traditional boutique mom and pop landlords operators starting to do this. And I think that would honestly be a great example of what we talked about earlier, which is that 3 to 5 year acceleration. I mean, that woman selling purses or whatever she sells, she never had to look at this before because she was probably doing a nice little business and she had some good customers. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So a couple of the other insights that I thought were interesting: 58% of people believe that sales will be the same or lower upon reopening. Do you think that should be considered a positive sentiment, that people think that they're going to open at the same levels or maybe a little lower? Do you think that's optimistic, pessimistic? How do you feel about that?
No, I think it's positive. I think a lot, and I think this is as you use real life examples, the data is great and the people that we interviewed are great. But I don't know about you, Adam, but I've talked to a lot of people day in and day out about what they're thinking coming out of this. And as you hear the emotional side that backs up this data, you really feel excited about what the future holds, right? In the sense that this 58% feel like things are going to get back to normal-ish in the sense of how people are going to interact and buy from them, knowing that there's some cycles where things may be a little bit lower, but we're going to get people back in the stores. If we learn anything from like the previous pandemic, let's say 1918, right? What happened is there was a huge increase in retail. There's a huge increase in what people spent in restaurants and got out in the market. We're social animals, right? We like to get out and we like to be able to interact and all that good stuff. And I think people are seeing that exact stat that you said, the 58%. People are seeing that as hey, it might take me a few months after I open up my store for everyone to come back or majority of my customers to come back. But I'm going to take an opportunity also to be able to advance that and use technology and use, different things that I build into my brand to be able to increase that in the coming months and years.
Another stat that kind of jumped out at me, 17% who started offering curbside delivery, started focusing on that part of their business, plan to continue it. I'm honestly surprised that's not more like 77%. It seems like, if some people that I know in the business have turned to that and have made it into a very interesting and profitable portion of their business. So I'm surprised to see that number was that low. Does that surprise you, or how did that strike you?
No, I think that's one of the things that comes with the territory of going through a pandemic. I think there'll be some shifts. Like if curbside before was 10% of the U.S. market, I think that is going to increase to like 15%. Small increases there, right? But I think people's behaviors are going to shift back, for the most part, back to buying in store, coming in store, because that interaction and just what you get out of a brick and mortar store is much more than the curbside. I think certain industries, yeah, you're right. They have adopted, and for the most part, there's a great segment of business that comes from that. But is it going to be higher than before? Absolutely. Is it going to dominate? No, because people want to come back in stores and interact.
So you think that's more of a blip on the radar as opposed to a change in consumer or a lasting change in consumer behavior?
I think so. Absolutely. I think so.
Another number, 41% said creating unique experiences is their number one focus to get customers back in the door. Any examples of that? I totally agree with it. And honestly think that number should probably be higher as well. Any specific examples that you're seeing or you're talking to people about how they are, what they're planning to do to really get people excited about potentially throwing a mask on and walking in a store?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of things. I think it's dependent on the different retailer or restaurateur. But I'll give you an example. There's a luxury brand here in this area. It has about 10 locations across the U.S. And as they've been thinking about things, a part of their quote unquote experience is all the way from safety and how I'm going to communicate that back to my consumers as they walk in. So signage at the door, signage internally in the store locations to talk about what the brand is all about, and they're all about safety and all about taking care of their customers. All the way to education pieces. I think one of the things that happens with this is as I walk through a store, maybe there's more kind of signage telling me about the different items in the location, where the origin of that item comes from, giving me more education, and then allowing me to interact with the salesperson to ask additional questions that I have. So I think there's going to be a combination of that happens. So a lot of retailers, especially that we've been talking to, have been preparing and creating. That's been part of their experience. And then I think the other side of the coin is the employee experience, right? Education to employees, making them feel good, making them feel, that, they're coming to work and, they want to be able to interact with their customers, but in a way where it makes sense for the customers, and giving them that level of education too. So a lot of retailers especially are working on that and building those paths and what they see as relevant in their store locations.
Last time I was in Manhattan, I went to the Everlane concept store.
Yep.
And they really embody what you're talking about. Every pair of pants, it tells you where the cotton comes from and
exactly.
Put it together and like how much that person was paid in a living wage. I mean, they go way over the top with what I would call like radical transparency.
Yep.
Not my term, but I think it's apt there. And I had a very interesting conversation with an international survey company, one of the largest survey companies for consumer behavior. And they said, and obviously this is people that are taking surveys. So, I don't know who these people are and why they're taking an hour out of the time to take surveys. But regardless, like the average millennial is willing to pay like 25% more for that radical transparency and to associate with a brand with an ethos. That's a big change in consumer behavior that I don't think you would have found 10 years ago.
Agreed.
And I think that what you said really kind of reinforces that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's going to be even more important going forward. I think the brands that, well, I mean, it's a part of connecting to your customer, right? And I think depending on who your customer is, and I think that's the first step that most brands have to define. Based on that, you have to figure out how to create that experience for that customer that makes sense, and for customer for your brands that have customer bases that are millennial based and or I think future generations are kind of in the same boat as well. But they want to learn about the stuff and they're willing to pay for it because it's important to them.
So based on your experience, what sectors do you think are poised to rebound well on the other side of this pandemic, and which do you see as having a long kind of uphill road back?
It's interesting. We get this question all the time, even internally from our investor groups and all, all different types of businesses as well. And I honestly don't think it's industry based. I think it's company based. I think it's the companies that really take this seriously, that use this time to be able to understand their customer and build both experiences, but build plans in general of what the future holds. And I know there's a lot of unknowns, like that's for everybody, right? But I think you can learn from the last pandemic. You can learn from best practices. You can learn from reading surveys. You can listen to Adam's podcast to learn a lot, right? But like overall, there's
number one thing you should do.
But there's a lot you can do to kind of prepare there, and I think that's the case. I mean, it's very apparent. Like massage type businesses probably are going to take a little bit longer to rebound, right? People are just going to have to feel comfortable. But overall, I think it's more the business versus the industry.
So do you think that your report says that 29% of respondents plan to close their physical locations, which, that's a huge number. And that's a number, that 30% number is a number that I keep hearing over and over, especially in the restaurant world.
Yep.
That is going to have an interesting domino effect on retail, especially in the shopping center world where co-tenancy is a huge thing. How big of an impact do you think that we're going to see in the short term, from a consumer standpoint of going into these places, and how long do you think that it'll take the consumer to kind of shake off that stigma of seeing an empty storefront and being like, I don't want to go to this place. It must not be a nice place, as opposed to, wow, hopefully they're taking time to reimagine their merchandising mix and get stronger after this.
I think Adam, it's no secret. 1 out of 4, retail and restaurant businesses go out of business within the first 12 months, right? So seeing this stat to me, is not that alarming, because 25% would either way would be closing down, pandemic or no pandemic, right? Those are the brands that have not understood their customer. There's a lot of factors that play into that, but we're looking at a 4% increase on top of that, which is not alarming, which is not huge. There's more brands actually going the other direction, where they're thinking about how to, again, create more experiences where they're getting in front of where their customers are, versus the brands that are closing down and thinking about closing down the brick and mortar experiences. So not really alarming to us here. As we saw that, it was, we actually thought the number would be higher, to be honest, because 1 out of 4 businesses anyways go out of business first 12 months.
That's interesting. So what else do you want people to take away from this survey? Kind of a parting shot. Like what maybe it wasn't the sexiest or splashiest stat, but something that really struck you and you want people to really think about as they start to think about reopening.
I think the biggest, I mean, there's a few different things, but I'll tell you, I think one of the good things that's come out of this is the acceleration of using technology and being able to plan better. Using, kind of some of the stats that we kind of learned in this survey and in talking to, customers is, over 75% of the brands surveyed felt that they were ready to reopen, that they were ready to use technology, that they were ready to go out there and really interact with the customers better. 58% of those felt that investment in new tools for reopening, both for their employees and for their customers, was important. That's one thing that kind of jumps out at me, that people get it. I thought there would be a lot more education that's needed here, but a lot of the brands that are out there and really understand their customer and understand what it takes to be able to interact with that customer are getting that they're gonna accelerate a lot of the plans that they had anyways in order to be able to connect better with their customers. And I think a the last thing I'll say here is, a majority of the survey group that was surveyed, 85% plus, believed in-store experiences where they were going to focus their time and money, and another 7% wanted to make sure that they build, an employee experience to create that, safety mechanism and all that. And I think that's also going to be important here. It's not only thinking about the customer, but also thinking about the employee experience on the other side.
Yeah, I've always said that. I mean, you can have the coolest concept in the world, but if the man or woman that is taking my order or showing me around the store is having a bad day, I mean, they're your front line, and if they're not communicating the brand and the message to me, then your product doesn't really matter much.
Yeah, totally agree.
Bobby, tell people how they can connect with you, connect with Raydiant, really get a copy of this report. Tell people how they can interact with you and with your brand and with what you guys are trying to do and how you're educating people.
Absolutely. So the report's available on Raydiant.com. Please, if you have not downloaded it, come through and download that. If anything, it gives you a lot of different information and accelerates that education into building your own plan. We've also put together a workbook for brick-and-mortar operators to go through kind of a step-by-step guide of how to reopen, depending on their industry. And so that's also available as you go download this report for you to be able to learn more. And of course, Raydiant.com, Raydiant.com. And if anyone wants, any sort of additional advice or, consultative advice in their business, I'm always available. Bobby at Raydiant.com can help. You don't have to buy anything from us. We'll give you that advice. We really want to help brick and mortar operators during this time. So happy to consult there as well.
Well, Bobby, I just want to take a second and acknowledge you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for kind of sharing your insight with us. And, I always love hearing that people are reinvesting in technology, reinvesting in experiences, because that's what it's going to take. As a parting shot, knee-jerk reaction, people are saying, we were talking about the retail apocalypse before all this, and now it's upon us. People are never going to go back into a store again. Give me your kind of knee-jerk reaction to that kind of soundbite.
Far from the truth. I think the brands that are not thinking about the right things, not thinking about their customer, not thinking about experiences, and are just putting their hands up in the air are the brands that are going to go. But I think there's so many other brands that are thinking about how do I use this opportunity and be able to get my brand out there. And I think we're going to see a shift. And again, as we talked about how malls come together, how strip centers come together, how our local communities come together. And it's for the better. I think there's going to be a lot of smaller footprints that we can interact with, a lot of great entrepreneurs building stuff, and I'm excited. There's going to be a great future here.
That's awesome, Bobby. That's a great way to end this. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm so excited to get back into the mix and see the good that comes from this. We've already seen plenty of the bad, but I know that there's going to be some good that comes from this and some innovation that comes from this. And just want to take a second and say thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and it's always fun to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely, likewise, Adam. Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bobby.
All right, bye-bye.